So here's a question. Tell me, which one of these categories fit you best? Are you one, a new plant enthusiast? You've seen all of the planting content on YouTube, on TikTok, and all other social media platforms, and you want to try your hand at some plants? Are you two, looking to grow your small collection of plants, but you probably have a limited space, so you're very particular about the plants you want to do because you may have work or other commitments, so you just want a plant that you can stick it somewhere and forget about it and have it add to your environment? Or are you three, a well-seasoned plant collector? Then, if any of these categories fit you, this is the video for you, because I'm going to be showing you 5 almost indestructible plants. These are plants that I've had in my collection for a very long time, and in my opinion, these are some of the easiest plants that you could have in your collection. Something that doesn't require too much care and attention, that can either fit into your established plant collection or make fabulous first time plants. If you've answered yes to those questions, then consider this plant. This is the very first one I'm going to talk about today. This is a Drina. There are many types of Drina that you can add to your collection. They come in wonderful shapes and sizes, but all of them sport this amazing minimalist looking structure. So you can see it's usually one long stem and a bushy top. Now these are usually long noodle-like leaves, and some of them, like this one, have some interesting color to it. You can see this one's slightly variegated with a bit of a pink purpley edging to it. This is just one of many that I have in my collection, and all of them bring something new and unique to the collection. These plants are great because of their wide-ranging care conditions. So these plants would, of course, as with many plants, love that bright direct light, and they can thrive in that, but they can also, on the other hand, handle lower to medium light. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you're somebody with limited window space, maybe you have a north facing window which tend to have less light throughout the day, this plant could work for you. It's also not a very fast growing plant, which means if you're somebody who's short on space, you can have this, set it and forget it. It won't grow too quickly. It's something that you can manage all year round. In terms of its care, this plant doesn't like its soil to be wet for long periods of time at all. You can go maybe once a week in the summer months, or even once every 2 weeks before having to water this plant again. It is a very drought tolerant plant. I have this one in terracotta, which allows the plant to dry out a lot quicker, and I tend to water this plant throughout the year, maybe once or twice a month, and that, combined with it being pulled slightly back away from a west facing window, allows this plant to keep on growing and remain nice and healthy. Unlike the Drina, this Monstera Adinoni is a beast of a grower. This thing is almost unstoppable. It grows very, very quickly and rapidly. In fact, as I was picking it up, I actually just broke one of these leaves on one of the wires. So that is a tremendous shame, but it doesn't take away from the beauty of this plant. I got this plant as maybe a 1 or 2 leaf cutting, and that was about a year ago. And look at the size of it. It sizes up so quickly. Trust me, you won't be disappointed. If you're somebody who wants to add something quick growing, potentially a climber like this one, so I've got it on some repurposed wood here. You could even train this thing to grow up your wall if you get the right sort of plant ties and support for it. This thing is super, super versatile, super, super easy to care for. This plant doesn't require any sort of high humidity. It doesn't require any special watering. It's very, very tough and resilient plant. All you have to do is make sure that it gets okay light. Okay meaning medium light, and this thing will just keep on growing for you. This thing is even known to thrive in low light also, because in its natural habitat, this plant grows under the canopy of trees, and what they do is they just make do with the limited light that they get, and they keep on climbing. So they throw the energy into growing as fast and as quickly as they can to reach the top. And when they do, boy, do they start to size up and give you some gorgeous, gorgeous leaves. I would 100% recommend the Monstera Adinoni, and it is for anybody, no matter where you are on your plant journey. It's just a gorgeous and also infamous plant as well. I think everybody needs to have it in their collection. The Monstera Adinoni. This thing right here it seems to defy the odds. When all the other philodendron around it were coming down with spider mites and losing their leaves left, right, and center, this thing was unfazed. This is the philodendron silver sword, and you can tell exactly why it's called a silver sword. Look at these mature leaves and that iridescence, that silvery blue color. And to be honest with you, I got this plant through a trade, and at first I wasn't really too fussed about it. I was like, you know what, I'll get it, add it to my collection. It's something interesting to look at, it's different, I'll add it. But I've really grown to appreciate this plant because of how easy it is to care for. I have this plant pulled quite far away from my east facing window, so it lives here. This is my east facing window, and about 3 meters away it sits here, and it's sort of behind a cabinet. And this plant is surviving and thriving and keeps throwing out these massive mature leaves just off the supplementary light that comes out of this grow tent. So it's not getting lots and lots of light, but it continues to grow and it continues to push out this amazing, immaculate growth. Okay, so it's the next day, and I've decided, let me have a look at this video that I just shot yesterday so I can start getting things into motion for me to edit this video. And I'm sure the keen among you would have noticed this, but I only noticed when I was looking back in the video. And my philodendron silver sword has an inflorescence on it. It's the very first time that I've ever had a philodendron bloom, and I'm kind of excited. A lot of times people say that you should cut it off because it does drain the plant of a lot of energy and it could result in some smaller leaves. But because I've never had it, I think I'm going to let it grow. Let me bring you in for a closer look. There she is. Look at that. It's still very, very young. It's not even out of its sheath thing yet. But I literally noticed and I was like, hang on, is that a new leaf? Is it a flower? I'm going to run out here to check. And it certainly is a flower, an inflorescence. And the way that I can tell is because it's coming out of the base of the leaf, as opposed to this one over here, which is coming at the top of the plant. And that means that this is a new leaf, whereas this right here is an inflorescence. How excited is that? Oh, I'm pretty chuffed. Now, because it is a philodendron, it's something different. And if you're looking to add a little spice, a little zhuzh, a little je ne sais quoi to your collection, look no further than this plant. You can get this plant as a small baby plant, and the leaves are very different to what they're like as they mature. But as they do mature, they begin to give you these amazing lobes like we have up here, and these lovely, lovely dark leaves. And this plant, like the Adansonii, you can train it to climb as high as you want because it will do that. You can already see all of this growth that I've had in not a very long time. When I think I got this plant, it was probably maybe around this height, so it was quite established, but it's grown quite a bit, especially given the circumstances that it's in. But if you're somebody who haven't got much light, but you want a plant that can grow to gigantic sizes and do it quite quickly, then the philodendron silver sword is the one for you. Now, this is a plant I don't have to introduce or say too much about. This is the infamous peace lily. This is something that you're going to see at every single hardware store. Even if you go to the supermarket, it's not difficult to find these plants. And there's a reason why they're so popular and so famous. And it's because of how easy this plant is. The other plants that I've shown, you need to be careful of how you water them. They could be easily overwatered. So if you're somebody that tends to forget about watering your plants, they're perfect for you. You don't need to think about them too much. Even if, I hazard to say, even if you water them once a month, I'm sure these plants are going to be okay. I don't recommend it, but I'm sure they can survive. This plant, on the other hand, if you're heavy-handed with your watering and you want a plant that is forgiving of that, then the peace lily is the one for you. This plant, though it is super, super easy to care for and probably the lowest light requirement of all of these plants that I'm going to show today, this plant is also tremendously forgiving when it comes to watering, right? This plant actually grows in the wild. It grows along sort of rivers and streams, so they're used to having their roots wet. In some cases, some people even grow these plants inside of aquariums as aquarium plants. I used to do it when I had a fish tank way back when, and the plants seem to not miss a beat. Usually when you see these plants in the big box store, they've got these quite wonderful looking inflorescence. Almost some people refer to them as flowers, but they're in fact an inflorescence. They are white. They're not amazing looking, but you will notice that I have absolutely none on this plant, and that is because it's not getting a lot of light. So this plant is even further away from my west facing window, and it sometimes gets no light throughout the day if it's a particularly cloudy day, but it does okay, it survives. The only thing with this plant is that it won't give me any flowers because it requires slightly more light. So this plant is a low to medium light sort of plant, and it's one that you can have. I'll recommend it to anybody. It is a fast growing plant. It is bushy, it is interesting, and also it will let you know when it's thirsty. Whenever these plants require watering, all of the leaves droop down. And once you've seen that, you know it's time to water it. Give it a good soaking, and it will perk back up, and it will be ready to rock and roll. And finally, this is my Hoya Crinkle 8. This plant is up there with one of my favorite Hoya in my collection. It's a plant that I purchased. It was quite well established, but it has continued to grow tremendously since the time I've had it. This is hands down the easiest Hoya to care for in my collection. This plant, you stick it in front of a window with good light and it will do the rest. Honestly, that's all you need to do. With watering, it is incredibly drought tolerant. So this plant doesn't want to be watered and have its roots wet for too long. It doesn't want to be overwatered, which is the only probably difficult thing to do. And if, as I said before, if you're somebody that's a bit heavy-handed, probably not the one for you. But if you're somebody who can restrain yourself from watering your plants or over watering them, then this is one that I would highly recommend. This plant in the winter, I tend to water it maybe once every 2 weeks. Sometimes I let that go a little bit longer in between watering. The way I check it is by just giving the leaves a little bit of a squeeze, and you can see it's very soft. So it is certainly in need of water. However, some of the other leaves, like here, quite firm, quite rigid, so I'll just give it a bit of a light watering today. So this plant is one that speaks to you. It tells you when it's thirsty, and you just have to interact with it a little bit. Just give it a bit of a squeeze. If it's not super firm, which you'll be able to tell, you can then go through and water this plant. But this plant, once you give it access to good light, I've got it on a hanging pot so I can stick it in front of a window. That's it. That's all you need to worry about, and it will do the rest. And also, unlike with these other plants, this plant is a notorious and frequent bloomer. This thing in the summer will produce blooms like it's nobody's business, honestly. In fact, it gets to a point where it can even get a little bit frustrating because Hoya, their blooms don't last very long. They sort of come out, they look amazing, they have a strong scent, so it fills your house with fragrance if you like that sort of smell. I'm not a particular big fan of it myself, but when they come, they go as quickly as they came, and they start to fall, and you have yourself cleaning up after this plant all the time. But if you can deal with that, then this plant is the one for you, the Hoya Crinkle 8. And what a beautiful plant it is. Just check out those dents and ripples that run throughout the plant. So there you go, 5 bulletproof plants to add or start your collection. I've been your host, Lithius. This has been Roots Ready, and as always, keep planting.